Hey everybody, it's Nolly from GGD here, and I'm really happy because once again we have a new one kit wonder for you. Now this was a genre that was by far the most requested out of any that we've had. When talking to our user base on our forum, they requested a pop punk themed one kit wonder, and here it is. One kit wonder, pop punk. Now, pop punk was a genre that's really near and dear to my heart, actually. When I started playing guitar in my early teens, I used to listen and play to all that kind of stuff. That was very much the music that I was listening to. So I'd like to think it's a genre that I know pretty well, especially when you think back to those kind of glory days, early 2000s, bands like Blink-182 hitting it really big and having really high budget productions. You know, when you think of Travis Barker's drum tones on Enema of the State or Take Off Your Pants and Jacket, those are really great, natural sounding drums recorded in amazing studios like Avatar Studios in New York. So, I really wanted to make sure that when we put together this one kit wonder, it had that element of like great room sound, great natural recorded tones. I mean, in general, that's something that we always try and achieve with GGD. But that's very much part of the specific list of things which we knew this one kit wonder needed to have. So I needed to locate a really great sounding drum room, and I found it in Crescent Records Studio, which is not too far from me here in the UK. They've got an absolutely amazing sounding live room. It's a really big open space. I went down there, I actually ended up doing the sampling for this one myself, so this is all me doing the hits. And I'm really, really proud of how it came out. I think this next to the Benny Greb sample library are probably probably the most realistic drum libraries we've done to date, and that comes down to like the level of dynamic detail, and the way that we sample the kit. We're always improving our methodology, and I think this one's come out really, really well. But when I think of pop punk, I think of high-tuned, poppy, smacky snare, toms and kick, a bit more of like a blunt attack kind of thing, and then really bright-sounding cymbals, crashable ride, really nice trashy-sounding china as well. All of that you'll hear in this drum kit. I've got it set up here in Logic. There's only 3 plugins active in this whole session. Admittedly, the bass, guitars, and percussion are printed down from a mix session. But as is my wont, I'm using a kind of SSL-style bus compressor with a fast attack. Here I couldn't do my typical 0.3. They only allow you to do 0.5. 100 millisecond release, no makeup gain, and using the sidechain to just cut a little bit of low end. This is just Logic's stock compressor. And then I've got FabFilter's Pro L2, which I just think is a great limiter. Tried using the Logic adaptive limiter. It didn't quite sound as good as this one, so I wanted to use this for the demo. And then finally a loudness meter, which is still set from before. It's not being pushed very hard. I'm only reaching, about -13 to -12 LUFS. So, what you're hearing is very much an accurate representation of the sound of the kit. So, no more talking, here we go. Cool. I played it on a fair bit. I really wanted you guys to hear that kind of more chill dynamic section there because, like I say, I'm really happy with how the tones of this kit have come out and the realism of this kit's come out. You can hopefully also hear some of that amazing sounding live room, especially on like the cross sticks. You can really hear that beautiful ambience from that live room. So it's a small kit, as is kind of typical for a pop punk setup. Very much inspired by a certain drummer that I mentioned earlier. Not going exactly for his tones, but in that kind of ballpark. So it's an SJC kit, very much kind of par for the course within the pop punk kind of genre. I've got a wicked sounding brass snare that I cranked up really high, and I left it fairly ringy, but through the microphone placement, I made it so that it's not like overly so within the close mic, and certainly within the rooms, it's kind of dispersed to that point where you don't have like that really annoying ring. Just check out how great it sounds on its own. It's got a ton of attack to it, that really lovely kind of smacky kind of character to the front end. You can hear the high ring, but it's not too distracting, and it's got a good wire sizzle to it as well. The kick drum, yeah, it's really big and deep. It's 20 inches deep, that bass drum, so it's quite a deep one, and that gives it a really big low-end bloom, especially on the softer hits. So something I found with this particular kit is that you can get a lot out of adjusting the velocities on the kick drum. If you hit it really hard, if you use the highest, like if you program at 127, which I don't recommend, but if you were to do that, you get a really quite a clicky sounding bass drum sound. And I didn't bury the beater on those, just for those that know what I mean with that, when I sampled it. But if you bring it back down a little bit, you can get like, it's almost like kind of being able to EQ how much low end and how much attack you want in your bass drum sound. So really go deep on the programming there if you want to be able to, get the most out of what is quite a versatile sounding kit. So I'll just show you what I mean actually by clicking here in Contact. The piano keys are not super responsive. It is a very deeply sampled kick drum. So, and hopefully you could hear within the example which I played earlier, there's quite a lot of variation for doing the doubles and things like that. I really loved how these toms came out. They've got a great tone to them, but they're not too long. Got loads of mid punch. I didn't EQ too much top end into them. I wanted them to kind of have that kind of real organic feel to them. Again, playing with the velocities though, you can get way more attack if you program them super hard, but they can also be very toneful when they're not played super hard. So this is what they sound like. I really love those. I didn't have to do much muffling on them. The floor tom's really nice and short as well. It kind of makes me think of almost like a Benny Greb kind of floor tom sound, although not as low tuned. Really, really love how that kit sounded in person and how it's recorded. Then we've got Zildjian cymbals. We've got A customs pretty much all around, with the exception of the Splash and the China, which are made by a company called Dream. Now those are made in China. They're pretty similar to the Wuhan cymbals, which, if you're a drummer, you know that the Wuhan Chinese cymbal, pretty cheap cymbal you can pick up in most places, and they sound absolutely amazing. They sound really trashy. This Dream one has a similar quality, and I really liked how the Splash sounds. I actually prefer these to the Zildjian Oriental cymbals, which are what Travis Barker plays and lots of other people. So that's why I chose them. But apart from that, we've got Zildjian Projection Series hats and crashes. Now, Projection Series means they're a little bit brighter and louder than the regular A customs. I really love how they record. We've got 14-inch hats, which you can't get anymore. I think they've discontinued them. Got a 19, or is it 18? A 19 or an 18-inch left crash and a 20-inch right crash. We've also got the 21-inch A custom medium ride. Now this is another discontinued cymbal. Still get the 20 and the 22, but the 21 is gone. It's pretty famously used by Brandon from Misery Signals. I think it's a wicked sounding ride. 21s in general, I think, really are kind of obviously a great middle ground between a 20 and a 22, where you can kind of get the ping and the kind of control of the smaller cymbal, but it just has a bigger sound, a little bit more wash, but not as much as a 22. It's a really nice crash sound as well on this cymbal, so you've kind of got 3 quite usable crashes. So I'll just shut up and play each of these cymbals by clicking on the keyboard here. I really love that bell sound, by the way. Really dark, oriental sounding China. I love how that sounds. And again, a kind of dark but really lovely sounding splash, very dynamic as well. So those are the drums and cymbals which we picked out for this, this drum sample library. Like I say, I'm really happy with how it came out. I feel like the tones are very appropriate for pop punk. They're natural, they're punchy, and in the mixing of them, I took it to the point where they can really cut through a mix, but I haven't layered them up with one-shot samples or anything like that. These are kind of full dynamic round-robin tones, and if you want to, you can easily stack, you know, your one-shot samples of choice on top of this to get something that sounds more like a kind of very modern production. It's also really useful for other styles that aren't pop punk. You know, you could use this for hardcore, which is, you know, fairly related, but I think it would make a wicked pop kit as well with that high-tuned snare and glossy-sounding cymbals. You could use it even within metal. As long as you don't need too many toms and cymbals, this will more than hang with, you know, super distorted guitars or whatever. So before I sign off, let me just kind of go through and show you a few of the features. We've got here on the main page, we've got the parallel switch and the master EQ. Now these are switching in a parallel compression, which is pretty integral to the sound of this kit. I'll show you in a second what it sounds like with and without. And a master EQ, which is adding primarily a high-end lift. If you turn those two off, you get much closer to a raw drum sound. It's not raw, but you could certainly add your own parallel compression and do some EQing on the individual channels to get quite a different sound. So I'll show you what that sounds like if I just hit play from the start and then toggle them on and off. So yeah, that's the effect that you get there. It's quite drastic actually, and as I say, it gives you a lot of processing headroom if you turn those things off. I will also take a moment to point out that this kit comes with 9 snapshots, which you can access through this little window in Contact. These are basically kind of mixed presets that I've made. It's not changing like the EQ and the compression, but it is rebalancing faders. It's bringing in more or less of the reverb on individual kit pieces. And, you know, just by doing that, you can actually get quite a lot of distinct sounds. I mean, if I were just to show you a couple from here, you've been hearing Let's Go, which is what I used for most of the demos on this kit that you'll see online. And I think it's just a great starting point. I'll show you what the same thing sounds like, let's say, on Warm and Roomy. I created this preset specifically for a section in our very own Joe Hamilton's demo song, which he did, which required this kind of lo-fi ambient drum sound. So you've got it just right there ready to go. If you wanted to have that for a moment in your song, just load up that preset. We could check out Vibe Kill, which is kind of the opposite. Call it Vibe Kill because you've kind of lost a lot of the excitement. It doesn't have the master EQ, the parallel compression, and the room mics are pulled right back. But this could be a cool, clean sound that you could use as a basis for a pop mix, for example. Just another option to have. And then I won't go through all of them, but we could check out maybe this one, which is kind of 80s style, using reverb instead of the room sound for quite a different kind of vibe. Maybe not the most 80s sounding moment there. Maybe over here. So you've got that kind of gated verb vibe. So yeah, definitely pay attention to those snapshots. I think some people don't realize that they're there. Beyond this page, well, I should point out over here, you've got a few options for CPU scaling, which kind of affects the overall realism, which is mostly based on how many samples Contact stacks up at a time. So if you've got a really busy part going on, is it allowing the full sustain of all of the previous samples while it's triggering new ones, which of course is loading more and more stuff into your RAM using more CPU. If you have that on high, there's no limitation. If you use it on medium, like I just tend to do as default, it sounds perfectly realistic, but it is doing a little bit of that. And if you put it on low, that quite drastically reduces the count to hopefully make it less CPU intensive. But you know, we always are on the side of great sound, realistic sound on GGD. I do think this is a program which runs really easily on most systems, but I recommend, if you can, to run it on medium or high. A low might be useful if you have a really busy session and you're trying to track into it, but make sure you switch out of that for any kind of bouncing, I would say. You've also got master, output, and reverb faders there. If you want to access the mixer, you click where it says mixer down here at the bottom. And you've got a kind of stripped down mixer. It's exactly the same on all of our other one kit wonders. You've got kind of individual grouped channels for your kick, snare, your toms. Got an overhead, and on this kit we've got a mono room channel and a stereo room channel. So here you can kind of set up your primary levels, but you can also go a little bit deeper. If you were to click on, say, snare balance here, it gives you a bit of overall kind of gain control in a way that you can't get in any other way on the mixer. So you can gain up the close mic and down using this fader, which, fair enough, it might just allow you to keep the fader in a more usable range. But you can also adjust how loud the snare is coming through in the overheads, the mono room, the main room. You can see here it's turned up a little bit in this preset, and the reverb sound as well. That can be really useful if, like I've done here, you want to have the snare coming through in the room a bit louder without getting loads of cymbals through, or just kind of, pump the snare up a bit louder in the room mics, which tends to always be a good thing. You might want to pull down the snare in the overheads, for example, if you're using a lower tune sample on top of this and you don't want to hear the high tune snare sound coming through in the overheads. Just a tip. When we come over to the overheads and room channels, we've got slightly different options. Here you've got a global control for the volume of the hi-hats and the ride, which is pretty useful. Depending on what you're doing, you might actually want less of the hi-hats coming through in the overheads and room channels if you're playing them open a lot. This is hyper-realism. You couldn't do this in real life, but it might just make your job a bit easier when you're doing mixing. And likewise, you might actually want to bring up a bit of ride if you're doing more delicate stuff and you wanted to cut through. But we have tried to preset the mix of this library so that hopefully it gives you something that's really workable for most situations. And then finally, you've got a slider for all of the cymbals together. So yeah, you can kind of, for example, as I think I've done here, pull down all the cymbals as well as the hats and ride, just to make the room a bit more drum shell focused. So that's your mixer. You can also output this to the different outputs. Here, I'm literally just using it on a stereo output, so I don't have all the contact output set up there. But you can route this out multi-style and mix in your DAW should you wish to. So that's this main landing page. Let's take a look at settings. Here's where you've got all of the articulations. You can adjust the MIDI notes that trigger each of the kit pieces, the different articulations. Something also really useful is you can adjust the level of individual articulations. So for example, if you wanted to, you can make the ride bell 2 or 3 dB louder, but without affecting the volume of the other articulations of the ride. So that's just off the top of my head, you could do the same with the splash or the cross stick or what have you. Again, hopefully the balance that we've preset is pretty good and realistic, but should you wish to kind of fine tune stuff, you can. We've also got a velocity curve, which allows you to have a kind of non-linear relationship of input to output in terms of velocity. So if you're playing on an E kit and you want to make it so that it's easier to hit softer dynamics, you can, for example, curve it that way so that you get to those softer velocities more easily. And then over here, you can actually toggle whether you want this to be a global thing or only to affect one of the kit pieces, or be able to do individual ramps per kit piece. You can also save your map, your mapping here, import maps from other sessions, export. So this is where you generally go for your settings. We've got a groove player, which in my version doesn't have anything loaded, but when you buy this program, you get a couple of groove packs thrown in for free to check out. So that's pretty cool. And so yeah, that's just about it really. That is One Kit Wonder Pop Punk in a nutshell. I have to say again, I'm really proud of how this came out, from everything from designing, deciding what I was going to sample, to finding the studio, to doing the sampling, to mixing it, to hearing it playing back. It's just been a really awesome process. It's been, a really fuss-free one. And I just really hope that you guys enjoy it as much as we enjoy putting it together. I think it's quite inspiring. I love using it. And I hope that it does the same thing for you. That's something that can streamline your creative processes and enable you to just get to a more final sound within your demos, or to work really well on an E-kit, give you something fun to jam along to your favorite pop punk tunes. So if you're interested to find out more about One Kit Wonder Pop Punk, hear some audio demos, check out some of our other products, whether they're One Kit Wonders or full fat drum libraries or Cabinet Impulse plugins or a compressor. You can find all of that over at getgooddrums.com. You can also find us on socials at Get Good Drums. And if you're a user of our software, then head on over to Facebook to the Get Good Drums forum. If you're not already a member, definitely recommend joining up. There's lots of cool people on there sharing information, sharing their music, And we always drop by and check out what's going on over there as well. So it's a good time. Anyway, enough talk. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you found it interesting, inspiring, and we look forward so much to hearing what you do with One Hit Wonder Pop Punk. So for now, all the best from me, and we'll get your drums too.